The weekly Cybercrime and Business podcast is brought to you by Surfwatch Labs. Surfwatch Labs delivers cyber risk intelligence solutions that help organizations understand the potential for cyber attacks, determine the impact to their business, and proactively address threats head-on. Everybody out there, today is Friday, July 24th, 2015. I am Jeff Peters, Surfwatch Labs editor, and I'm here with Matt Leifers, Surfwatch Labs writer, for this week's Cybercrime and Business podcast. A little bit later, after we run down some of the headlines, we have an interview with Andrew Wild. Andrew is the CISO at Lancope, and we chatted yesterday about some of the recent healthcare breaches, particularly UCLA Health System, and just some of the stuff that's been going on in the healthcare sector so far this year in terms of cybercrime. But yeah, I throw it over to you, Matt, for the top cyber headlines from Surfwatch Labs data to get us started.
Coming in at number 3 this week, according to our data, we had CVS as the number 3 top trending industry target from the week. CVS pharmacies made headlines this week after their online photo center was compromised. The company alerted their customers that payment card information could have been leaked. Other stores with online photo departments also have reported suspicious activity in recent weeks, including Walmart Canada, Staples, Rite Aid Corporation, Sam's Club, and Tesco's. It was later discovered that P&I Digital Media, which is a third-party company that provides services for these online photo centers, was potentially compromised. So I'm sure there's going to be more information on that in the coming weeks. Coming in at number 2, we had UCLA Health. The California Health System was hit with a data breach that affected 4.5 million people. Originally, UCLA Health announced that the breach may have put some personal information at risk. 4.5 million people, that's quite a bit. This information that was compromised includes names, addresses, social security numbers, and personal health information. The breach was discovered on May 5th, 2015. It is believed that the data breach originally began back in September of 2014. And the number 1 top trending target, I'm sure everyone's heard about this week. Anytime you go on Twitter, you're seeing all kinds of information, was Avid Life Media. This is the parent company of AshleyMadison.com, and they suffered a data breach, compromising 37 million members of the popular infidelity website. The website for Established Men, which is also owned by Avid Life Media, was also affected. The company was attacked by a hacking group going by the name The Impact Team. This hacking group demanded that the 2 websites be taken offline, or else they'll dump all the user information for the 37 million plus clients. Those are the top cybercrime headlines for the week. To start off discussion, I thought, Jeff, that we could actually discuss the AshleyMadison.com. And like I said, everyone's talking about it. Me personally, I had never heard of AshleyMadison.com as a happily married man. One of the things I found interesting about this, for anyone out there that doesn't know what this website does, they are a website that essentially helps you seek the comfort of someone else and essentially cheat on your significant other. One of the things the company brags about is their security. They're going to keep your information safe. It's going to be anonymous. No one's going to know what's happening. Well, they got compromised. So I think this kind of points out, Jeff and I have the privilege to see all kinds of data. We get to hear about a lot of these stories. Really, there is no organization that is above cybercrime. And I think when you hear a story about this, that really echoes that.
And I guess the motivation for this hack, at least according to the Impact Team, Ashley Madison has a full delete program where basically they charge you, I believe it's like $19, and they're supposed to delete all your customer information, which obviously is a pretty good business model considering you're dealing with people basically committing adultery. I believe that's their motto, is life is short, have an affair.
Yeah, and just a real quick note about that full delete program has brought in $1.7 million in income for Avid Life Media, so a lot of people do it.
Yeah, and this Impact Team is basically saying that this data is not getting deleted as promised, and I believe that was sort of their motivation for the hack, or at least that's what they're saying. But I guess what I found interesting about this attack, It's similar to the hacking team breach from a couple weeks ago in that, in essence, both these companies are victims. But when it came to the hacking team, everyone, just freely talking about all the data and everything that's out there. Same with this Ashley Madison. Everyone's looking at the data, and there's all these stories about these, families getting broken apart. And both the CEOs for Ashley Madison and for Hacking Team are both kind of coming out and criticizing the media and saying, hey, we're the victims here. And, here everyone is, kind of reveling in all this information. One interesting story that I read a couple days ago from Reuters, they said that the website's Canadian parent, Avid Life Media, was hoping to raise up to $200 million by listing its shares in London this year. And obviously those plans are now on hold. So kind of an interesting effect that you don't really see very often when it comes to cybercrime is that, they were planning on going public, and now it looks like that's going to be on hold, at least for a little while.
Another interesting story this week. I'm going to kind of paint a picture here for everyone. Imagine you're driving down a highway going 65, 70 miles an hour. And all of a sudden, some weird things start happening to your vehicle. Your air conditioner kicks on. Your windshield wipers start going back and forth, and windshield wiper fluid spraying all over the place. And then all of a sudden, you start to decelerate without you doing anything. You lose complete control of your car. That happened this week. It was part of a demonstration. Two hackers, Charlie Miller and Chris Valasek, were able to penetrate the security on a Jeep Grand Cherokee, I believe, allowing them to access many functions on the vehicle with the points that I just said. They were even able to mess with the volume control and the radio. And on the center console, they actually were able to come up on the screen so the driver could actually see them. And they were saying things, and kind of a scary situation. Have you heard anything else about this, Jeff?
Yeah, this story is pretty interesting because the week started with this Ashley Madison story, and I thought, well, this is definitely going to be the craziest story of the week. But this one's obviously a little bit more worrisome because you're talking about potentially life or death if you're messing with people's vehicles. And I believe the flaw is in this Uconnect, which is the internet-connected computer feature that's found in hundreds of thousands of Fiat, Chrysler cars, SUVs, and trucks. Uconnect basically controls the vehicle's entertainment and navigation, enables phone calls, offers Wi-Fi. You see all those commercials, hey, get Wi-Fi in your car. But I believe that was the entry point for these two researchers. And they're going to present at Black Hat, which is, I believe, like 2 weeks. So hopefully they'll be putting out a little bit more information there. I mean, they're not going to release the full details of the hack, obviously, from a safety perspective. It was 2013 when they did the first sort of vehicle hack, but for that one, they were actually plugged into the vehicles directly. They were kind of shocked when they found out that they could basically get to any vehicle with this Uconnect all over the country. I believe there was, like 400-something thousand vehicles that they found potentially vulnerable. So yeah,
you could be sitting right in your house and right on your laptop and say, and if you had the required information, you could potentially do this. That's pretty interesting. That was a pretty interesting read. I was also pretty surprised when I read about that.
Yeah, and Chrysler has released a patch. I believe they released it the same day the story came out. But one of the problems is that, from my understanding at least, is that it can't update over the internet. What you have to do is you have to go to Chrysler's website, you have to download the update onto a USB drive, then you got to plug the drive into the vehicle's dashboard port. So you just wonder, if there's all these vulnerable vehicles out there, how many people are going to know about it and then take the time to actually do it. I mean, I've heard stats in the past about people not even going through on recalls, even when they're free, taking them into the dealer. So you just wonder when it's something like you got to download stuff onto USB and plug it in, how many people are just going to say screw it and leave themselves vulnerable to potentially a pretty scary attack.
Yeah, it is. And, this isn't the first time that we've heard about this topic. The auto industry, that every year they're becoming more sophisticated. They're adding more capabilities. The internet, is one of the more recent ones. Senator Edward J. Markey actually sent out a letter to 20 automakers in 2013 asking them to answer a series of questions about their security practices. The answers show that Markey describes a clear lack of appropriate security measures to protect drivers against hackers who may be able to take control of a vehicle. So that when we hear this story, it's more advanced because, like Jeff had said, we have heard stories about people actually being plugged into a car and doing it, but never wirelessly. So it kind of takes it up a whole new level.
Yeah, I believe there was one instance like in 2011 of some kind of wireless attack, but really wasn't much news about it because they didn't really go public with it. They kind of quietly informed the car makers, at least from what I read. On the legislative side, like you said, Senator Edward J. Markey and Senator Richard Blumenthal, they're both members of the Commerce, Science, and Transformation Committee, and they actually introduced a bill on Tuesday that's related to automobile cybersecurity. They said the timing of the bill isn't meant to coincide with the story, but it just happens to coincide with this huge story, so it's kind of interesting. But in the bill, there's 3 provisions. There's cybersecurity standards, which is to basically protect against hacking and data protection, things like that. The second provision is privacy standards. They want to make sure that all this stuff is transparent, that customers have the ability to opt out of data collection without being told, hey, if you opt out of data collection, you're not going to be able to have GPS or whatever. And then the third provision is a cyber dashboard that displays an evaluation of how well each automobile protects both the security and privacy of vehicle owners beyond those minimum standards. This information should be presented in a transparent, consumer-friendly form on the window sticker of all new vehicles. So, who knows if that's going to happen, but it'd be kind of interesting 5 years down the road. You're looking at shopping for vehicles and you see the sticker, this one's got an 8 for cybersecurity, or this one's got a 6.
Yeah. So we're, instead of looking for miles per gallon, we're going to be looking for a cybersecurity rating in the future when we go to purchase an automobile. That should be interesting to see.
Yeah, so those were the 2 big stories of the week. Going forward, we're going to kind of change up the podcast a little bit and try to give you guys some of the latest advisories and legal actions, just run down some more headlines for you to hopefully make this podcast more informative on the cyber risk front. So yeah, I guess I'll get started with some of the cyber advisories. We'll just kind of try to quick run through a couple. There's more 0 days that were found this week. In addition to all the hacking team-related 0 days, HP's 0 Day Initiative has released 4 new 0 days in Internet Explorer that can lead to remote code execution. Also, there was a German researcher, Stefan Esser. He disclosed a privileged escalation vulnerability in OS X, which is yet to be fixed in the latest release of the operating system. So we assume Apple will be sending out an update for that pretty soon. Another advisory that caught my eye was there's this new point-of-sale malware. Trend Micro discovered Gamma POS. It's a new breed of point-of-sale threat that's currently spreading across the United States and Canada through the Andromeda botnet. According to Trend Micro, Gamma POS uses malware coded using the .NET framework, and that's a first in POS threats. And it has been spotted in 13 U.S. states, including my home state of Wisconsin, as well as in Vancouver. So that's a new threat out there, and the way that this is getting spread is they said this Gamma POS threat uses a shotgun or dynamite phishing approach. That analogy is just saying basically they just try to blast as many targets as they possibly can, even unintended or unrelated targets. And hopefully by infecting just so many different people, eventually they get lucky. So they're using a spam campaign to distribute Andromeda backdoors, and then it infects systems with this POS malware, hoping to catch someone just out of sheer volume. So those were the advisories that stuck out to me. Was there any stuff on the legal side that stuck out to you, Matt?
Yeah, we had, starting off, we had some arrests, and it led to some pretty interesting information. It actually involved JP Morgan Chase Bank. Authorities arrested 4 people in Israel and Florida in 2 separate but connected cases, a pump-and-dump securities fraud scheme and operating an unlicensed Bitcoin exchange used to acquire Bitcoins to pay for ransomware. The criminal complaints make no mention of JP Morgan, but sources say the players are tied to the computer hacks of JP Morgan and Chase Company and other financial institutions. So, a lot of people heard about JP Morgan Chase being breached, and it was largely attributed to Russian hackers. That might not be the case from what we're kind of seeing. There's been some speculation about that. The New York Times actually reported one of the people briefed on the matter said he believed that the defendants had intended to use some of the email addresses obtained in the JP Morgan hacking situation to find other people who could be persuaded to invest in otherwise worthless stocks.
We're working on setting up an interview for next week's podcast where we can chat about sort of the scheme and this pump and dump stuff, because I'm rather ignorant on financial matters like the stock market. But hopefully we'll have a little more on that next Friday on the podcast.
Next, we had another arrest. This was Eddie Raymond Tipton. He was the former security director of the Multi-State Lottery Association. He was convicted of a $14.3 million lottery scam, which authorities say they believe is the biggest lottery scam ever. Tipton had secretly installed a self-deleting rootkit on the lottery state computer system that allowed him to tamper with the lottery's random number generator, thus allowing him to buy a guaranteed winning ticket for a future draw. The last arrest that was made this week that made headlines was Andrew Skelton. He's a 43-year-old employee of the supermarket chain Morrison's, and he was sentenced to 8 years for posting sensitive personal data relating to almost 100,000 of the supermarket's staff on the internet, as well as sending it to newspapers due to a grudge. The leak was in response to a warning he was given after the company found out he used the mailroom at Morrison's headquarters in Bradford to send out eBay packages. The data breach cost the company more than 2 million euros to rectify.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm laughing, but it's just he gets in a spat with his boss about eBay packages and then just decides to blast 100,000 coworkers' information everywhere. It's just, I find that funny.
You don't mess with a man and his eBay.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah, just let him do his thing.
And then really quick before we get to the interview here, we got some lawsuits that were in the news. Two of them here I wanted to mention quick. The first one was Experian, which is one of the big three credit bureaus, is the target of a class action lawsuit that was just filed in California, I believe like 2 days ago. The suit alleges that Experian negligently violated consumer protection laws when it failed to detect for nearly 10 months that a customer of its data broker subsidiary was a scammer who ran a criminal service that resold consumer identity to data thieves. And I know Brian Krebs has wrote a bit for the past year about this Experian data breach. And then another one that popped up back in the news, we've got a lot of old stories popping up, Neiman Marcus, I believe they were breached right after Target. Previously, their class action suit had been dismissed over the 2013 data breach, but a judge just recently reinstated and basically said that they can go ahead with that class action lawsuit. The class action lawsuit against Neiman Marcus alleges that the data breach plaintiffs suffered injuries even if they have not yet been the victims of identity theft or fraud. So these injuries include an increased risk for future fraudulent activities, greater susceptibility to identity theft, things like that. And the Chief Judge Wood noted that the Neiman Marcus customers should not have to wait until hackers commit identity theft or credit card fraud in order to give the class standing, because there is an objective reasonable likelihood that such an injury will occur. And they also wrote that why else would hackers break into a store's database to steal consumers' private information? Presumably the purpose of the hack is sooner or later to make fraudulent charges or assume those consumers' identities. So it'll just be kind of interesting to see how that story plays and that lawsuit plays out. Yeah, so that's it for this week's discussion. Moving on, we have an interview with Andrew Wild, the CISO of Lancope, and we chat about the recent breach at UCLA Health System, as well as some issues facing the healthcare sector in general. My first question is, with the recent breach at UCLA, that makes it the fourth major healthcare-related breach in 2015. There's actually 5 if you go back a full calendar year and count community health systems last year. So I just wanted to get your thoughts in general on all these big healthcare breaches that we're getting. Is there anything that sticks out in your mind about them?
Well, first of all, the first thing that comes to mind is there's no denying now that the healthcare industry is a target, that the criminal organizations have figured out how to monetize healthcare information, and they are actively trying to collect, steal, siphon, whatever term you want to use, as much of it as they possibly can. So if you're in the healthcare industry and you don't think you're a target because you don't have, defense technology secrets, you don't think you're a bank, you don't think people are trying to steal money, you're missing the point. They figured out how to monetize the value of that information, and they're coming for it. It's unfortunate, but that's just the world we live in. The information technology has brought many, many advances in making healthcare more efficient, better, new ways to outreach patients, new ways for patients to interact with their healthcare providers. But it also has opened up a way for people to monetize that information. And the healthcare industry has to do a better job of trying to protect confidentiality of the records they hold.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say they might not think they're a target, because I was reading the LA Times article about the breach at UCLA, and they said that the revelation that UCLA hadn't taken the basic steps of encrypting this patient data drew swift criticism from security experts and patient advocates, particularly at a time when cybercriminals are targeting so many big players in healthcare. So just wondering if you have any thoughts on that. People are always talking about encryption. Maybe some people overplay it as like the solution to everything, but it does seem kind of odd to me that with all these breaches going on, that a major institution wouldn't take that extra step to mitigate that risk.
Right. Well, I'd say first off, I don't have any inside information about what actually happened at the case at the UCLA Medical Center. But I would say that, number one, healthcare organizations should know that they need to do the best they can to protect the confidentiality of the information. Encryption is a valid solution, but I'd also admit that a strong encryption solution is not implemented overnight. I mean, encryption, to be valid, encompasses many kinds of factors that can be complicated procedurally to implement. Key management in particular. If you have encryption but you don't have strong key management, there's little value to the encryption. So it's easy for us to take pot shots and ask, well, why wasn't data encrypted? Hopefully we'll get some answers to that. I'm hoping the answer is going to be, well, we've got a project, we've been working on it, and it takes a long time to do. At this point in time, I guess I'd say most organizations in the healthcare industry that have healthcare data should be working to ensure the confidentiality of the data, and encryption is a strong control that can be used. And if they haven't done it already, I'm hopeful that they're going to relook at their timelines and see how they can possibly accelerate the implementation.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you then a bit about spending. I was reading a quote from Gavin Reed, the VP of Threat Intelligence over at Lancope, and he was talking about the problem is that no one wants to spend this additional money, particularly at hospitals where that money can instead go towards new medical equipment or something that could actually save lives. So, in a lot of other sectors, there's these distractions as well, but it seems like in healthcare, it's more of a life or death kind of distraction. I don't know if that's sort of a straw man argument where you can't invest in both, but I mean, do you think that a fundamental shift is needed, or do you think that it's just a matter of maybe these institutions doing simple things better in that regard?
I think it's a learning experience. I think for many organizations, not just the healthcare industry, they're really beginning to understand how information security is an essential component of risk management. And many organizations have not fully understand the risks to which they're exposed by not properly implementing information security controls. That's not to say that I'm hopeful it's going to get better immediately, but people are becoming more aware. And also, even within the information security community, the InfoSec professionals are beginning to look at information security really from the point of view of risk management rather than just technology controls. These things coupled together, the organizations themselves becoming more aware of the importance of information security risk management, coupled with the fact that information security professionals themselves are now beginning to look at this more from a risk management point of view, hopefully will deliver us to a better place.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. So if you're looking at something from a risk management standpoint, is there anything in particular that stands out to you in the healthcare sector for where that management needs to take place?
Well, I'd say, one thing that's very interesting about the healthcare industry is particularly hospitals, I'd say they face enormous challenges when you look at what their IT infrastructure is like. For example, it's my understanding, and I'm not an expert in the healthcare industry, but that many of the employees in a hospital, that many of the folks that work in a hospital are not employees, strictly speaking, of the hospital themselves. So hospitals oftentimes have significant bring your own device challenges. Coupled with all the advances in healthcare devices, they have tremendous Internet of Things security problems. Those two things combined together make for significant challenges that the organizations face.
Yeah, and last week on the podcast, we were talking about the financial sector and all the large number of small banks and credit unions that really don't get a lot of coverage when it comes to cybercrime. And I was thinking this probably applies similarly to healthcare, where you have a lot of small doctors' offices and clinics. So I just wondering maybe if you could speak to any of the challenges that they face, or if there's any advice in terms of a smaller office with limited resources.
Well, I think one of the solutions that may be applicable for many of the smaller healthcare providers, think of a small doctor's office, there are a growing number of managed security services providers, the MSSPs, that are really targeting this industry to help. So they're looking to be able to provide that, because you think about a small medical office, they likely don't have any direct IT staff working for them. You have the providers themselves, the administrative office folks, and oftentimes no IT support. The IT support is oftentimes contracted out. And while HIPAA does have requirements, I wouldn't necessarily say that across the board, every healthcare provider has the information security solutions they need in place. I'm hopeful, though, that the MSSPs can begin to offer solutions that help fill the gap for some of these small offices.
Yeah, and in covering the cybercrime news and reading it every day the last couple of years, it seems like one problem I just see again and again in the healthcare sector is stolen laptops. It seems like every week there's another story where, this company had a laptop stolen and this breach affected, usually a smaller amount of people. It's not, in the millions, but it seems like that's a pretty widespread problem. I don't know if you agree with that or if you have any kind of advice or solutions you can give on that front.
Well, the concept of having a stolen laptop, there's a couple problems that result from when you have a laptop that's stolen or lost. One, you have a loss of productivity. You have a loss of a physical asset that has value. And then the biggest problem, I believe, is the loss of the data that was on the machine itself. And in the healthcare industry, this is the healthcare information that has got so many people concerned about having their private health records lost. And we have regulations in place and laws to help improve this. But the bottom line is that this is a difficult technical problem to solve, particularly when the technology changes so rapidly and the folks that are using these IT systems aren't necessarily IT experts. Encryption is a strong solution. Again, encryption, though, can be tedious and difficult to implement correctly because of the challenges with key management. But certainly any organization, particularly in the healthcare field, that's going to be dealing with information that is sensitive in nature needs to make sure that they've done a risk assessment for the kind of information they're going to have, and they've looked at the possible scenarios and have controls in place that address those risks.
Yeah, then my final question would be, just looking forward a little bit, do you see anything really changing, or do you see this problem getting worse? Because I'm thinking back, to like 2013 or a couple years ago, and there's a lot of warnings that, from the FBI and other places saying that these big healthcare breaches were going to happen, and now it seems like they are happening. So I'm wondering if you have any sense of if you come out and predict the future a little bit for us, maybe.
I'd say that the larger healthcare providers are likely, if they haven't already, but the few that I am aware with have begun investing significantly into information security. I'd say that's partly response to some of the breaches that have come across, but also because of the regulations. So there is awareness of the need. I'm hopeful that things will get better, but I don't know that it's going to get better in the near term. I think there are enough targets of opportunity out there for us to continue reading about loss of confidentiality for healthcare information. I don't see it getting significantly better in the near term. Organizations need to invest, and I do think, like I said, that the bigger organizations are beginning to do that. I'm a little more concerned about the smaller organizations.
Yeah, well, that's all the questions that I have, unless there's anything else you wanted to touch on.
I don't, but thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you and to your audience. I very much appreciate the chance to talk about this. It's, to me, a very important issue and something that we really as a society need to work to try to solve.
Thanks for listening to this week's Cybercrime and Business podcast. As always, you can find us on iTunes, YouTube, Podbean, SoundCloud, Stitcher, all the podcasting sites. And for more information, check out surfwatchlabs.com.